began this journey into the promised land in the book of Numbers, where Moses began the exploration of the promised land by sending spies. Do you remember he chose 12 spies and he sent them into the promised land? Stay with me. I know this is a bit of a review, but I want to lay some groundwork. He sends them in, and he's very specific about what he wants them to do. We hadn't talked much about this, but he's very specific. When Moses sends in the spies to explore in Numbers, he says, go up to the hill country. And in Numbers 13:18, Numbers 13:18, 18 to 20, Moses says this, see what the land is like. Here's what I want you to do. He doesn't say, go see what the people are like. He says, I want you to go see what the land is like. Now, you see whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. But here's what I want you to do. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good? Is it bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Sorry. Are they walled or fortified? Listen to this. How's the soil? Bring me back some samples. Right? Moses is saying, bring me back. What's the soil like in the promised land? Is it fertile or is it poor? Are there trees in the promised land or not? Are they scrubby or are they oaks? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. And we're told that he sent them into the promised land at the time of the harvest of the first grapes. I love that. The first ripe grapes were coming in. It's an invitation. Moses has given those spies an invitation. Go in and see this land flowing with milk and honey and bring us back some of the stuff. Go and tell us about this land flowing with milk and honey. Bring back samples. We want eyewitness accounts of this land. How fertile is it? Bring back the fruit. And we're told that they bring back pomegranates and figs. And one of my favorite things is they bring back a single cluster of grapes. And Scripture is very clear. It's a single cluster of grapes. And they have to hang it over a pole, and it takes 2 men to carry it. Can you imagine a cluster of grapes hung over a pole that takes 2 men to carry? That's some grapes, y'all. That's some fertile soil. That's like above and beyond kind of stuff, right? You know, there's kind of grapes that are really big. What are those called? Those grapes that are almost like plums or something. You know, I'm a little afraid of them because there's like a pit in those. Can they be seedless when they're that, you know? The cluster of grapes on a pole, 2 men to carry. 2 men to carry. So the spies do go in, and we're told that 2 come back with a positive report. 2 focus on that, and they say, the land's flowing with milk and honey, you won't believe it. But 10 come back, and they haven't thought about all the glories of the land. They've gotten hung up on the power of the enemy. And they focused on the power of the enemy. And fear, we've talked about this in the past. You can look those teachings up on YouTube. We talked about fear and an unblessed heart cause negative thinking. And they spread an evil report amongst the people. They said, we seem like grasshoppers to the people there. I mean, the funny thing is, Moses says, what was it like? Tell us about it. It says, Moses and all of Israel went out to greet them as the spies were coming in. And they're saying, tell us about it. And they say, the 10 that are negative, they say, well, it does have good fruit, but. That's all they say. That's the one, they get there, okay, it does have good fruit, here's the poll, let us tell you. But, here's why we can't listen to what God says. You got to listen to what I say. I mean, God says we can take it. It's already given to us to march ahead. We can't. Don't listen to Him. We can't do it. We seem tiny in our own eyes. The people, this is literally what they say, we seemed like grasshoppers, and the land we explore devours those that are living in it. Then you got these 2, Joshua and Caleb, and they say, God's given us the land, let's go take it. Let's stand on the Word. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a place of rest and peace, a place of houses that we didn't build, provision that we didn't earn, wells we didn't dig, vineyards and olive trees we didn't plant. It's a rich and fertile land. It's been promised to us. Let's go take it. But the people follow the evil report. They focus on the problems and not the promise. They focus on the problems and not the promises. They choose to listen to the negative report. Bill Johnson, pastor of Bethel Church, put it this way. I love this quote. When I listen to the voice of a problem more than I listen to the word of God, faith will always be an uphill battle. If I receive my counsel from the difficulties of my life, my heart will always be shaped by inferior things. Y'all, I don't want to settle for a life of inferior things. Here's what I would say to you. I'll go a step further. I'm not going to settle for a life of inferior things. We've been translated into the kingdom of light, out of the kingdom of darkness. And a lot of Christians just kind of settle in. And they settle into the wilderness and just say, this is comfortable, and I feel right at home. And they kind of live there, live out of their flesh. I'm not going to settle. There's a kingdom ahead. I don't want to settle for a life of inferior things. God doesn't want His people to settle for a life of inferior things. It's why He sent the people to explore the promised land. He said, I want you to see the fruit that's coming. If you see the fruit that's coming, you won't settle. If you see the fruit ahead, you won't settle. I want you to focus on the fruit. I want you to see the fruit. It's lavish. It's above and beyond anything you could ask or imagine. It's one cluster of grapes. This is a shadow. It's a natural picture of a spiritual reality. One cluster of grapes over a pole with two men carrying it. That's the kind of fruit that's in the kingdom. Yeah, we have battles to fight. We have an enemy to overcome. So what's it going to take for us to be willing to march into the promised land? To rout the enemy, to crucify our flesh, to put on the whole armor of God, to take up the sword of the Spirit and wield it in battle? When are we going to be able to do that? When we see the fruit, when we know about the fruit. When there's a promised land, a kingdom, and it's full of rich, abundant fruit. When we've seen the fruit, the grapes on a pole, we're not going to settle for something less. And God said, I want you to know of the fruit that's in this kingdom I'm giving you. We've tasted it. And we're not going to be satisfied with the puny grapes back where we live. We know the size of the fruit in the promised land. So you might say, okay, well, I understand that in the promised land there were grapes and there were pomegranates and there were figs and there were olive trees. It's a shadow. Remember, a natural picture of a spiritual reality. What's the fruit in the kingdom? How about love? You want to walk in love? How about peace? Do you want to walk in peace? That's the fruit of the kingdom. How about joy? Do you want to live in joy? Now, I'm not talking about happiness. I'm talking about joy unspeakable. I'm talking about supernatural joy, other joy, the joy of the Lord, which will be your strength. The fruit is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, ladies. Self-control is in that fruit. And you know how you get the fruit? God gives it here. Here. It's rich. You know what else? What other kind of fruit? Resurrection power. Power that Paul said is at work within you. The kind of power that calls death out of life. Calls life out of death. That kind of power is at work within you. That's fruit of the kingdom. It's fruit of the kingdom. Strength, hope. God's power within you through the gifts that He's given you. The abundant life. You're blessed with every spiritual blessing in Christ, in the kingdom. Your true identity is in the kingdom. You're the head, not the tail. You're blessed with every spiritual blessing. You're chosen. You're anointed. You've been set free. The fruit in the kingdom, y'all, it's abundant. It's abundant. It's every good work of salvation. It's the healing of bodies and souls and deliverance from oppression and sin. And not only does God want us to just savor the fruit, He wants us to walk in the fruit. It's a so that. God has given you fruit so that, He says, now you bear much fruit. You want to walk in love towards others? You want to change this culture? God's going to use you and He's going to order your steps. And He's going to take that fruit and make it rich in you, and you're going to walk in it. And it's going to ooze out of you on others. You're going to walk at a level of peace that when you walk in a room, it's going to change the atmosphere, and the people in the room are going to walk in peace. Y'all, I'm not saying this is a maybe. He'll order your steps to places that you don't want to go, but you're bringing fruit. You're bringing baskets of fruit. Life in the kingdom. Life in the kingdom. To sow that. And we just receive it. We wield the sword because there's a rich inheritance. There's savory, abundant fruit. The whole narrative of the battle at Jericho, which we talked about last week, begins with God speaking this. He says, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. I've delivered Jericho into your hands. I'm not delivering Jericho into your hands. I'm not going to deliver Jericho into your hands. You need to know this going in. The story of the taking of Jericho is in Joshua 6, chapter 6. And 6:2, the second verse of the 6th chapter of Joshua, God says, I have given you the city. I've given you the city. We're just receiving it. We're receiving. We are receiving. All the children of Israel did was just walk by faith. God said, you're going to walk around the walls. That made no sense, I'm sure, to them. But they just took God at His word. And they walked around the walls. He said, I want you to walk around the walls once a day for 6 days. Walk around the wall. And the priests were told to be blowing the ram's horns. Often, the ram's horns were blown when there was a victory. It was a sound of victory. So as they're walking around the walls, they're not waiting for victory. The priests are sounding the ram's horns. We are walking in victory. We are walking in victory. We may not have seen it yet. We may not know exactly how this is going to work, but we're walking in victory. They were surrounded with sounds of victory. And on the 7th day, which was the Sabbath day, the day the people would rest, God was on the move. And the people stood and watched. Literally what they did was, God said, shout. And they shouted, a victory shout. For the Lord has given you the city. God conquers, and His people inherit. God conquers, and His people inherit. The enemy is defeated, and it's a shadow. They had an enemy, the people of Jericho. We have an enemy. He's called the devil. Satan means accuser, and he's a liar. And our enemy is defeated. He lost all rights to you at the cross. You fight from a posture of victory. He's defeated. But nonetheless, you fight, right? I mean, it's not that we just sit down. We fight. We fight. Ephesians 6. This is what Paul said, Ephesians 6:10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. We could stop right there. Be strong in the Lord and in whose power? His power. We strive, but it's not your power, it's His power. It's a matter of saying, God, I can't do this, but you can. I can't do this, but you can. I'm not doing this, you are. So finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Verse 11, put on the full armor so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers. The word there for rulers in the Greek is arche. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the arche, against the rulers and against the authorities, against the powers, and the word for powers is exousia, of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. We fight against the arche and the exousia. But then Paul comes along in Colossians 2:15. I love this verse. He's talking about Jesus. Colossians 2:15. And he says, Jesus, having disarmed the arche and disarmed the authorities, the exousia. You fight against the arche and the exousia. And then he says in Colossians 2, let me tell you about the arche and the exousia. They are a defeated foe. Jesus has disarmed at the cross the arche and the exousia. Actually, He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them at the cross. You have an enemy. We have an enemy. But I don't want us to have big focus on the enemy. We're not told to have big focus on the enemy because he's a defeated foe. But we are fighting a battle, right? We're taking ground. You have an enemy. He's not to be our focus. We're not to get up in the morning and say, I got an enemy. That's not to be our focus. But you have an enemy. Jesus said in Luke 10:19, Jesus said this, Luke 10:19, I have given you authority over all the power of the enemy. I have given you authority over all the power of the enemy. Every battle is spiritual. Every conflict is essentially against the forces of darkness. Paul wrote this in 2 Corinthians 10:3 and 4. For though we live in the world, we don't wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, our weapons have divine power to demolish strongholds. Now you might say, well, what's a stronghold? Tell me about a stronghold. Let me tell you what a stronghold is. It's a mindset. It's a false belief that denies God's truth. It's a mindset that competes with the truth of the character of God. It's a pattern of thinking that sets itself up against God's truth. Y'all, it's why the sword, which is the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, is so damaging to the enemy. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 10:4, the weapons we fight with have divine power, God's power, supernatural power to demolish strongholds, not to manage strongholds, not to manage strongholds in your life, to demolish strongholds. He goes on in 2 Corinthians 10:5 to say, we demolish strongholds, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. I love the Message translation of the word arguments there is this. We demolish barriers, every barrier that's erected against the truth of God. We demolish barriers that are erected against the truth of God. Francis Frangipane said in his book, The Three Battlegrounds, he's a wonderful author, demonically induced, that strongholds are demonically induced a pattern of thinking, specifically a house made of thoughts, which has become a dwelling place for satanic activity. You might say, well, what is all this? It's when you have a belief, a stronghold in your life is when you have a belief that's not in line with God's truth. It's a belief not in line with God's truth. And then you've built on it. It's a mindset not in line with God's truth. We've believed it, and we've built on it, and it's become that lie, that false belief has become the foundation of a stronghold. It's often a lie, just an outright lie, but not always. I want to give you an example, okay? Many of us grew up in homes where it was communicated to us in some way, shape, or form, you're flawed. You're flawed. You're not in some way, and I'll let you fill that in. You're not as pretty as you ought to be. You're not as gifted as you ought to be. You're not smart enough, quiet enough, it's just been communicated to us. Now you can fill in that blank. Now we are flawed, right? We're not perfect, so it's not a lie. But the way it's communicated to us and the way we receive it is errant. Does that make sense? So it's like you're believing a lie. You kind of are. But you are flawed, but you take it in and you make it something that it's not. And often parents communicate that, right? That errant way of thinking. And it gets in a child. And we take that in. It's like a brick. And then we spread mortar over it. We do this without thinking about it, but we subconsciously think, because I'm flawed, I'm less loved. I'm a little less loved. And I gotta kind of do something about that. And in some households, that very thing is communicated, right? And we put mortar on that brick. And then we say, in addition to that, well, I'm going to need to be more. Whatever that lie was that we believed, or that errant thinking, I got to be more in that area. I've got to overcome that deficit, right? So I got to be more in some way. And we put, the angst of that is how much more is enough, right? And we put mortar, and then we get another brick. You see how we're building an ideology? I would like to say ideology. That's really the way I talk. But for y'all's purposes, I'll say ideology. But it's an ideology. It's wrong or errant thinking. And we begin to, as Francis Frangipane said, we begin to build a house. And the foundation is errant thinking, right? But we build a house. And then we come to a point, we put more and more, and we think, well, I can't let people really see me. I can't let people really know me because I'm flawed. And I haven't made up the deficit. And so I can't really be intimate in my friendships and my life, because, do you see how you're building a house? You're building a house. I need to be perfect. I've got to really work. This is where perfectionism, right? I got to work to overcome. And we built, I call this the stronghold of shame. The stronghold of shame. And what happens is you realize that you're dealing with some things in your life, and there's an underlying errant thinking, but boy, it's down there, right? Your enemy wants it down there hidden because he's hiding down there in it. And God's word to you is that's not his plan for you. He has freedom for you, pulling that up at the root. But that's an example. And you often realize you're dealing with a stronghold when you have a struggle that you just cannot get victory over. It's ongoing, and it goes on and on. And the normal means of getting victory aren't working. When you just continue in an area of your life in some sort of defeat. Let me give you some other examples. This one's similar. I don't deserve to be loved. We get that in us. I don't deserve to be loved. And then we build on it. I'd call that the stronghold of rejection. Bad things always happen to me. Bad things always happen to me. When is that next shoe going to drop? and we get into a stronghold of self-pity. And it begins to manifest as victim mentality. Do y'all see that? How you can build on that. You can build on that. And we get good at building on it because it helps us deal with it. Right? And then we can live at a low level of angst all the time with that stronghold. Because the enemy hides in that stronghold. I have to be right, I have to be good, or God's not going to really fully accept me. Stronghold of drivenness or performance. I got to earn God's love. Legalism. God could never forgive me. God could never forgive me. Stronghold of guilt. My value rests in how I look. Even if it's just a little bit, some of my value rests in how I look. And boy, doesn't the world feed into that. Stronghold of appearance. My worth is associated with what I have, with my stuff. Stronghold of materialism. I could never forgive him. I can never forgive him. Stronghold of resentment. I have to figure this out. I'm the one that's got to figure this out. Stronghold of control. These are all lies or errant thinking. I mean, you might say, well, I don't know that I could ever forgive him. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But you can agree with the enemy, right? When we agree with these lies, when you agree with one of those lies, you form an alliance with the enemy. He doesn't have any power over you, but he sure can whisper a lie to you. And we take it in, and we build a stronghold. Don't agree with him. When we agree with these lies that we're listening to, we're taking in the voice of the enemy. The accuser, the liar. We're listening to the liar. Let me read this. And your freedom in the promised land is at risk. There's fruit, and we have been given a weapon to overcome strongholds.